intelligent risk. Take those measured steps and learn from your mistakes. You show me someone who's really successful in business, I'll show you someone who's failed over and over again.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be necessarily the perfect spot, but pick a spot on the horizon that you want to drive towards in your life. And then you get on that boat and you row. It's probably the one that people struggle with the most because it is so personal, telling people that they need to take ownership and control over their lives.
Your series talks about heroes in motion. What does this concept look like in action within the workplace? Josh, it's a pleasure to have you back on Transform Your Workplace. This is the 7th time that you're on, and we're here to wrap up your Foundational 5 series. So it's good to have you back.
Hey, Brandon, great to see you. And it feels like we've been talking forever. Thanks for sticking with me on this.
Yeah. And for the listeners who've been sticking with this whole series, appreciate you. There may be some new listeners. So let's recap the 5 principles. And let's start with agreements, Josh. Why don't you just give a quick little summary of each, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Yeah. The basis of the Foundational 5, these 5 principles that I talk about, these are all lessons that I learned through about 20 years being in large scale commercial construction. And most of them I learned the hard way. They all come from a place of survival for me that I had to create and learn. And then I've decided that other people need to hear this and deserve to hear these principles. So the first one's agreements, where I say agree to nothing until you understand the terms, whether we're talking about a contract or a verbal agreement, a relationship that you're in. You need to understand the terms. Both parties do. So that's really the basis of that first one.
Communication's next. What's that one all about?
Yeah, communication is, this is the one where I say this is everyone's superpower. A lot of people, when they hear communication, they think about speaking, right? And how how many $5 words can they roll out? But what I say is in communication, yes, speak up when you disagree. You want to daylight those issues first, but the real superpower in communication is listening, and listening first, and listening with a empathetic mindset when you're doing it. And that's what great leaders do. And that rolls right into principle number 3, leadership, where I say you need to take time to ruminate because decisions in haste are usually a waste. And, folks, that word rumination, if you look it up, it has a few different meanings. And I'm not telling folks to overthink everything, right? And just sit in their thoughts all the time. But especially when you're a leader, you do need to think again, before you act on big decisions that are going to affect a lot of people. Don't make the hasty decision. Don't shoot from the hip on those big decisions. Think about, the domino effect of the decision you're about to make. And then the fourth one is agency, which is where I say, be your own ally. Don't sabotage your own objectives. Whether folks are ready to admit this or not, we are all our own worst enemy. And I think golf is one of the greatest examples of that. Like, this should not be a hard game. That ball's not moving.
It is.
Ball's standing right there. It's, this is all up between your head. So don't sabotage your own objectives. Build yourself up, be your own ally, and have agency and ownership over your life. And then, if you're able to accomplish, live into those first 4 principles, you're going to have great relationships in your life. And in principle number 5, relationships, I tell folks you need to spread goodwill generously because a positive approach will pay dividends. Life is like a mirror, right? And how you act is mirrored back to you, and usually tenfold. So spread goodwill generously and bring a positive approach. And that's one where I always tell folks, like, I'm not telling you to go out there and click your heels and be happy-go-lucky. Okay, that's not what I mean when I say bring a positive approach. What it does mean, though, is when you're in those pits of despair, as I call them, those really hard moments in your life, you got to remember that there are better days coming, and keep that positivity where you can, and it's going to come back to you. And if anyone, any of your listeners have been following this series, I've given you some epic stories that prove that point, where I could have been, I could have played the villain. I could have been, the cynic the entire time. But, bringing that positive approach to these unbelievably challenging situations with a lot of dynamics and people involved is what paid dividends for me in the end. So that's a very brief version of the 5 guiding principles that we teach in the Foundational 5 series.
Yeah, thanks for the recap there. Now, when you teach these principles in your series, you always wrap up kind of the way we're wrapping up today, really. And you call this session Daring Greatly. Where did that come from?
Yeah, Daring Greatly comes from the Teddy Roosevelt speech he issued back in the early 1900s, I think before World War I. It's called The Man in the Arena. And I tell you, this this speech, it actually sits right above my computers here, so I get to look at it every day. And it's funny. I'll go into a quick story here. My wife bought me this canvas with the speech on it early on, I think during COVID, and this is when I was finishing this really challenging project in Boise, Idaho, and starting another really challenging project, the courthouse, Monoma County Courthouse, which I talked about in our last episode. And, really felt like I was going through hell and struggling in all sorts of ways, trying to hold everything together and still be a present father and husband and brother and friend, all those things. And so she got me this Man in the Arena speech, and I have heard it before, right, but never put a whole lot of thought into it. And I was like, well, great. Thank you. That's very sweet. I got like 50 change orders I got to go write for this project, and I got to get ready for mediation on this other project. So, but thank you. And she's like, just put it up where you can see it. Okay. And that's it. Right. And so I did. So I hung it up right above my computers. And then every day I started looking at it and reading it and starting to understand what Teddy was saying then. Right. And, then she bought me the Brene Brown Daring Greatly book, and I never read it. But in the meantime, I started developing this Foundational 5 series. And the first time I showed it to her, she's like, "Oh, you did read the Daring Greatly book?" And I was like, no, I didn't. And I was like, this is really based off of what Teddy Roosevelt said in that speech that you got me, The Man in the Arena. And she said, well, this is exactly what Brene Brown is talking about. I was like, okay, well, if I read it the same way that Brene Brown did, I'm doing okay, and so, that's where, this whole series is framed around this idea of not fearing failure. Right. And when I talk about failure, it can be off-putting or triggering to people because they start going inside themselves and thinking about, mistakes they made or they were a part of. Right. And so it can be, jarring to people. That actually happened recently with me when I was introducing the Foundational 5 series to some folks. And, I started off with, I'm someone who's failed and failed epically. And I'm going to talk about those failures. But, I talk about them as, the gift of failures, because without those, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be able to pass this knowledge and these experiences down to other people. Right. So, my belief is that which is really what, Teddy's saying in his Man in the Arena speech, is you cannot fear failure. When we fear failure, that's when we make the really big mistakes. That's when we miss those really big opportunities. If we're sitting back always fearing, what may go wrong and who's going to criticize us, you start to lose agency in your life, and you start to become an audience member in your own life rather than being the main character, which we all are. So it's not about falling on my sword, when I talk about this stuff. It's about learning from my own mistakes and from the mistakes of others that, involved me. And never making the same mistake twice. That's a big goal here. And what I'm trying to implore people to do through this entire series is take measured risks. Take measured risks in your life. It doesn't mean jumping off skyscrapers. I'm not talking about that, right? But be willing to put yourself out there and take ownership and agency in your life. And I promise people, you will experience transformation if you take those thoughtful and measured risks. And that's what, to me, that's what Daring Greatly is.
Yeah. I was thinking about you recently, Josh, because I had interviewed Amy Edmondson, who's, she pretty much coined the term psychological safety, and she's
Yeah.
out with a new book, and she talks about intelligent failure. And she breaks down like basic failures are like, stupid mistakes and negligence and stuff like that. Complex failures are ones where there's externalities and stuff that we can't really control that creates a failure. And then the intelligent failures are probably the smart risks. Those are those accidental failures we probably don't make twice, but we uncover a path forward. And I loved what she said, because it aligns so much with what you're describing with like these gifts of failure stories that you've had. Like, I guarantee you've never made the same mistake twice. You've always learned from it. You've taught others. You showed them the path. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm a fan of her work too. Like, I think she is the one that coined psychological safety, and that's that's spot on. Again, it's not about just being wild and crazy and shooting from the hip all the time, taking it, being risky, but intelligent risk. Take those measured steps and learn from your mistakes. You show me someone who's really successful in business, I'll show you someone who's failed over and over again.
Yep.
Right. That's the truth.
Agree.
That's the way the world works.
You talk a lot about purpose-driven leadership in all of your sessions. How does the purpose-driven leadership relate to the failure that we're talking about too? Because to me, it feels like when you're purpose-driven, you've always got that North Star out in front of you. You know that that's your destination, and the people around you, that's their destination, and failures are going to happen along the way. Like, maybe talk through that a little bit.
Yeah. You mentioned the North Star, right? And, the idea behind purpose-driven leadership is really picking a spot on the horizon. Okay. It doesn't have to be necessarily the perfect spot, but pick a spot on the horizon that you want to drive towards in your life. And then you get on that boat and you row. Purpose-driven leaders they're going to map out a journey that matters to them and their people, whoever their people are. They're going to venture out with intentions. They're going to have great ambitions. They're going to endure the challenges, because I promise you, if you are working towards something, you will face challenges. They're going to be great listeners. They're going to not just listen, but they're going to hear what was said and do what they need to do with it. Purpose-driven leaders are going to share a journey with others that matters more than just to themselves. They're never going to let go of the wheel. And, when you're living that way, you're going to lead and build your life with purpose, right? And that's the whole idea behind purpose-driven leadership, is driving towards something that matters and matters more than just to you.
When you think about those the 5 principles: agreements, communication, leadership, agency, and relationships, which of those do you think is the most transformative for leaders and organizations as well? But let's start with leaders.
Gosh, yeah. Yeah,
it's hard to pick a favorite.
You're not the first one to ask me that. I've had many folks that have actually gone through this series come up to me at the end and ask me, hey, like what's the one? Okay, I know there must be one, right?
Silver bullet.
Yeah, the silver bullet. I always tell people there is no silver bullet here. You can either act on what I'm providing, or you cannot. And I've given different answers to that question. And a lot of that has to do with where I'm at in my life. These principles come in play stronger roles. But if I had to pick one, it really is relationships, because the first 4 principles, if you act on the best practices and the tools within those first 4 principles, those are all very introspective, right? And if you do that, if you're able to fill out those first 4, your relationships will flourish and transform you in ways that you can't have if you don't understand the principle of agreement or quality communication or how to be a leader or how to take agency in your own life. Your relationships will struggle. So that's number 5. The 5th principle is absolutely transformative, and that's how we transform into better versions of ourselves. That's how we finish growing up, is when we have great quality relationships around us. So I'm picking number 5 today. It could change tomorrow, but that one always seems to resonate with so many people when we go through it. Those relationships are everything in your life.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing that I think about when I look at these principles, I'm like, the relationships might be a result of all of the other
Yeah.
principles as well. It's like you might have the agency to me seems like a foundational piece because it's like if you have control and it starts like an introspective look, and then it starts going outward, communication, agreements, leadership, and then the relationships come as a byproduct. But
True.
the relationships aren't everything. Relationships are the foundation of all of it. So it's hard. It is hard to pick a favorite.
It is. Agency, that's the one. And I think we talked about this in that podcast. It's probably the one that people struggle with the most because it is so personal, telling people that they need to take ownership and control over their lives. And here's how, right? We don't just tell them it. We show them how and why. That's a really hard one for people to hear. Even people who think they are in control. When you start, when you hear the way that we speak about it, it's a challenging concept to grasp. And it's one that we all struggle with these things. It's not like I'm perfect. I struggle with it all the time too, right?
It's because we're imperfect and we're all striving for perfection, but also because of there's so many external factors and so much noise around us, current events and things happening in our businesses and just things that are outside of our control. Sometimes it feels like we're out of control because of those things that are not necessarily happening to us, but they're on the peripherals, and that makes us anxious and feel like we have no control. And therefore we decide not to take control because of that reason.
That's right. And so the leadership navigation system that we teach in principle number 3, leadership, it's 3 main tools that are designed to jump you out of those anxious moments or those, purposeless moments where you're like, wow, the world is falling apart around me. Why try? Those 3 tools that we teach within the leadership navigation system. I look at mine and, I look at my life destination map and my time optimization worksheet. I look at that stuff weekly to make sure that I stay on course and stay focused on the things that I can control, and try to mute out all that other noise that's in all of our lives. So that's why we do the leadership module before agency, because look, we're not going to just tell you go own everything. All right, here are the ways that when you feel like you don't have ownership over your life, don't have agency, look at what you said to yourself. Okay. And drive towards those things.
This is just kind of a funny current event thing, but you're not building buildings right now by any means. But over the last week, we've been in the news, it's been the cyclone bomb from the coast is coming in, and there's lots of water. Everything about your gifts of failure have all been about water and damage and flooding. And did that bring you a little anxiety just hearing that? We may get, I don't know how many inches of rain, and we didn't have much over here, but did you think about that at all?
Yeah, actually, every time that water comes up, I get a little, sweaty palm. Yeah, and the cyclone bomb thing actually was kind of a fun event for us. I had a couple of people who texted me, was this your fault? And I was like, come on, I didn't.
Seriously,
but actually, just recently our neighbor had a leak on their plumbing line out to the street. And, I heard running water. I'm like, oh no. Right? That is one of the worst sounds in the world to me, So water's been chasing me my whole life, man.
Yeah. Your series talks about heroes in motion. What does this concept look like in action within the workplace?
Yeah, that's the purpose-driven leadership piece, right? Never standing still. If you look at, any great story, whether it's a movie or, a great novel that you've read, right? The hero in that story is always in motion, moving forward. They're transforming along the journey, right? While whoever the victims and the villain are, those folks rarely change. All right, Darth Vader kind of turned into a decent guy at the end of Star Wars, right? Threw the Emperor out over the pit, but usually, villains and victims in storylines, they don't change. It's the hero that's in motion. It's the hero that's growing. It's the hero that's on the mission with helpful guides along the way that you're always rooting for. So that's really what that concept is defined. It's the power of story, and every one of us is living in our own story.
The principles all aim to help individuals survive belong and become, and how can organizations start to align with human needs, like you're teaching inside this series?
Yeah, that's the magic question. I call it the hidden staircase. It's I always ask folks at the beginning of every class, I ask the participants, what do your clients want? What do your team members want? Right. And it's, I get a variety of questions. It's all, we want to be respected. We want to be paid well. We want safety, those normal, absolutely correct answers. And I say, so the same things you want. Right. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that's what I want. This comes down to these three basic instincts you mentioned, that humans are wired to desire, not because I say so, because that's what the science says, is we have this innate desire to, want to survive, belong in the group, and become. That's that transformational piece, become a better version of ourselves every day. And so at the organizational level, the number one job of, organization is to create a psychologically safe workplace, whether it's a construction site, whether it's a corporate office, whether it's a fast food joint. If you have a workplace that is psychologically safe, then you're going to create high performing team members. That's period. It does not matter what kind of organization you're running. So, and there's a lot of tools that we talk about within the Foundational Five that enable organizations to live into that. But it sounds simple, but it's challenging. It's challenging because that is a top-down thing that has to happen. And often in organizations, whether intentional or not, psychological safety is not the first thing that comes to mind. Right? We're talking, things that come to mind are profit, bottom line, insurance, physical safety, perhaps. And bringing psychological safety into it has a huge effect on employee performance. And all those, if you care about your profit, if you care about physical safety, if you care about schedules, if you care about quality, then psychological safety is where organizations have to start.
When you look back on when you created this series, and I'm sure it's the same for an author too. You put a book out there or any sort of content, you don't know what the feedback's going to be, and if even your approach is the right for people. What kind of feedback have you got along the way in the series, or even from this podcast, that has shaped your approach, or maybe altered the way you might even structure this, if at all?
Yeah, no, I mean, well, I will say, the series has never been identical once. I'm always tweaking, enhancing, taking feedback. And a lot of that also depends on who am I speaking to? Am I talking to executives at a large company? Am I talking to small business owners? Am I talking to project managers or mid-level leaders? Like, there are tweaks, but it always changes. And when I created this, for me, part of it is like, I need to get all this out on paper. Like, this is so much information to share. And boy, I know I'm not the first one to go through every single one of these things. I'd love for other people to learn these lessons, not quite as hard as I had to learn them. I didn't know how much that would resonate, with other people. But I tell you, every single time I've done this, and we've had over 150 folks go through the series so far, I have people who've been in the business for 30 years who come up to me and say, thank you. I wish I would have heard that 25 years ago, so, and again, it's not because I'm smarter or faster or stronger than anybody. I'm just willing to share, I'm just willing to share and put myself out there, what I've learned. And I took the time to organize it into these 5 principles.
Yeah. So what's on the horizon? I mean, we've kind of wrapped up this series. If there's a call to action for people, like what do you have in mind?
Yeah. We are planning on doing an open enrollment for a wide variety of folks who would like to go through the series. We already have a couple of the Foundational 5 series set up in 2025 for specific organizations, but I want to open this up to a wider audience, where maybe you're a project manager, at a construction company, and there's no leadership program there, but you have aspirations to become a better leader, you can sign up on your own or ask your company to sign up for you to come join this series. So we're gonna have two cohorts, and the main one here, the first one is we're gonna have a building industry focused cohort to go through the foundational 5 starting in quarter one of 2025, and that's open to really any current or aspiring leaders, that work in the construction industry, whether you're a contractor, a developer, a owner rep, a project management company. If you touch buildings, this series is for you. And then there's also going to be a concurrent cohort for a broader business base of people, and we'll be rolling out information on that, coming in 2025 here early on. So we're really excited about it. We've already had a lot of people. I've had people asking me to do this for about a year, and I finally made the time to structure the program. So that's coming up here. It's hard to believe it's almost Thanksgiving. We're going to start issuing open enrollment here in January.
So awesome, Josh. I mean, I don't know if many listeners know, but you and I have been like really close best friends for a long time, and just seeing your journey of building buildings and having those failures. I didn't quite know all the details of those failures when you're in them, but just knowing that when you came out of that and you went off on your own to build what you've built and want to help people, it shows that you are very purpose driven and are trying to teach people how not to fail the way you failed, and hopefully avoid some of those biggest pitfalls. Maybe just share a little bit more about your why. I think it's important.
Yeah. It's okay for people to fail, and they have to grow. Right. But my why, when I was in my previous position, my previous career, I could reach a much smaller audience than I can stepping out on my own. And make no mistake, it's scary to be out here on your own, running your own thing. Right. It can be a lonely world if you don't have great people around you. I'm fortunate that I do, including you, Brandon. And, so my why was, again, to help people avoid, the big pitfalls that are absolutely avoidable. And, give them the tools that I had to learn the hard way, give those to them early so that they can become masters of their craft. Right. I'm not going to tell people how to build a building. There's lots of people who know how to physically build a building, but, the tools that we're giving, the lessons learned, these would help people to become masters of their craft so that they, can be part of high performing teams. And everything, I always leave people with, the not twisting up what I'm giving you here. This is not a silver bullet. Okay. These are actionable things that people can use. And I always tell folks at the end, I want them to be diligent, but not litigious, be prosperous, not greedy, be intentional, not manipulative, be purpose-driven, not purposeless. And finally, be the hero and the guide in your life, not a victim or a villain. And that when you live like that, you will be able to build with purpose. Whether you're building a building, building an organization, building a relationship, you will be able to build with purpose if you take action through the Foundational 5 series.
My guest today has been Josh Durham, the founder and CEO of Gamut Project Solutions. Josh, thanks for doing this series. We're going to have to figure out what to talk about next, because it's funny. I will give listeners a little hint of this, but back in high school, we used to play with your mom's, like, what was it? Phonics radio headset thing. And we used to have like a make-believe radio show, and look at us here. Like, how many years later actually podcasting, and we got to keep it going.
Here we are. Yeah, it's funny that we did that, and then here we are. It's hilarious. But yeah, I have some ideas. We have a lot more to talk about, and I'd love to share it with your listeners.
Thanks for coming on today, man.
Great seeing you, Brandon.